what is it like writing and working with Jon Stewart? Because you're a writer on the Problem with Jon Stewart. He's such a legend. Now just generally to the general public, but started off as a stand-up comic. What is it like working with a guy like that and seeing him take your writing and bring life to it? Like, it just, not that your writing doesn't have life, but like someone that's like taking it and just being like, I'm gonna run with this. Maybe they'll say it word for word, maybe they'll add shit to it.
Jon is awesome. I mean, he's just like the best, and one thing he does really well is elevate whatever's given to him. Like, he's actually kind of like, it's funny because I write for him. There's a whole team of writers on the show. You know, there's like 8 of us, but he's pretty resistant to saying other people's words verbatim. You know, he's not really going to let you like directly put words in his mouth. You know, like he will take what you give him, and occasionally, look, certain lines make it in here and there, but like for the most part, he's going to synthesize it directly through his voice. He's going to twist it. And what he does the best is he's going to elevate it. You know, when he puts it into his voice and puts a little like spice on it, like he will elevate it almost every time. It's really fun to watch. It's really like lucky to get to write for someone like that. There's definitely people you can write for where it's like they're gonna say what's on the page, and Jon is not that way.
Yeah, so he'll take a bullet point or a joke or something like that, just kind of have it in his mind, and then he'll expand on it on camera.
He's a really fantastic performer. That like you might be like he's so seamless you might not notice how strong of a performer he is, but like he'll take it, he'll make it better, he'll probably punch up the wording, even at the very least he'll put it directly into his voice, and like he just and then he'll sell it. He'll go out there and really fucking sell it.
Like it's so good and it's so funny. And with this show, Problem with Jon Stewart, you guys are making fun of things in an attempt to change, if I'm saying the mission correctly. You want to actually change shit. So there's always there's the laugh, but then there's also like, oh shit, like this is kind of exposed now. Like I wrote down one of my thoughts. This was after watching the Burn Pit episode, and I wrote down that comedy is like surgically unclogging an artery to clear a path for the obvious to flow back in. And it seems like a lot of the things that you guys tackle as a team on the show are just like obvious things that people should be afforded, but we've become so defensive as a culture where we build up these walls. And it's not necessarily like the idea is being put into the viewer's mind. It's like we've built up so much defensive bullshit that once comedy kind of fucking Drano releases the tension, like releases that out, the obvious just kind of comes in like a vacuum, and you're just like, why don't we pay veterans that got cancer from serving in Iraq and like and shit like that? So
that's like the show, like we do have some general episodes, but for the most part, like the goal of the show at its best, I would say, is when we can take an issue that is impacting a specific community, something that isn't too big to actually make an impact in, you know, something that has a specific thing that needs to be done, and just try to like spotlight it and help the people who are really driving towards a solution drive to a solution. So the Burn Pits thing, which was the first episode of last season, also by far and away our least funny episode, because it was such a like personal issue to Jon that he was kind of like, I don't really want to be that funny here. I just kind of want to lay out this important thing, you know? But the Burn Pits episode, you know, for anyone listening, if you don't know, and you probably don't, because I didn't until I started working at the job.
Yeah,
like,
same.
When our troops were in Afghanistan and Iraq, when you invade a country, which is kind of fucked of us to do, but let's skip over all of that stuff.
It's a pastime.
It's an American tradition. No one plans for what do we do with all of the garbage that this is going to create. So the way they handle that is they would dig giant pits just next to bases, the size of multiple football fields, and throw all of the garbage, all of the toxic waste, clearing out the porta potties, surplus, broken down tanks, tires, vehicles,
cleaning out
weapons.
a porta potty, a single porta potty on its own is probably enough to give you cancer. So the fact that you're putting all that shit into a mishmash of like a tanker sized field is crazy.
That's right. Then they would cover it in jet fuel and just light it on fire.
Yeah.
And they would keep throwing stuff into the pit, lighting on fire. And these big plumes of black smoke were next to the bases, and that they were blowing over the soldiers. These things were burning 24/7. And these soldiers were breathing them in, and they were getting these they would come back and then 10 years later get these super rare cancers that were very clearly linked to this. But the Pentagon and the VA kept saying, there's no direct proof that these cancers are from breathing in this toxic waste.
There's no direct proof from the studies that we're funding.
From the studies that we're funding. Yeah. So sorry, we're not going to cover this as service related.
Yeah.
And veterans were dying at alarming rates. And these are people that the government promised them, so this was just like John did with 9/11 first responders. He took on this fight. He worked, he's not like some celebrity who's like going to make a commercial and, rock the vote or whatever. Like he's driving down to DC regularly, lobbying Congress people, senators, going to meetings with veterans who are fighting for this. And as of, I don't know when this is going to come out, but as of 2 days ago,
probably like 4 weeks, something like that.
Okay. So then as of a month ago for you listening,
there we go.
The Senate passed the PACT Act literally 2 days ago from when we're taping it. And that now it has to go to the House, but the House is expected to pass it. And it's going to give coverage for these cancers to the veterans who've been suffering from it and who've been put through the ringer and paying out of pocket. And like, it's going to make a real difference. And to be part of a show that was a small part of a show that was a small part of that process, it is amazing. You never expect comedy to be able to do something like that.
Yeah. It's something that I noticed watching the Burn Pit episode. Was it a senator he was interviewing? I forget who the guy's status was.
Secretary of Veterans Affairs.
Secretary of Veterans Affairs. He seemed like he had a passion and a will to help out the veterans. And then when he was confronted with some tough questions by Jon Stewart, he went back to the same talking point without actually thinking about or answering the question or just saying like, I don't know. But he kept saying something like, we're waiting for the regulations to supersede this boundary before we go forward. And John's just like, what is this thing that you're waiting for? And then kind of talked for another couple minutes, and then the guy's not able to define it. So I think it's cool, the work that you guys are doing, even if it doesn't have a direct legal change, like in the case of the Burn Pit episode, but just like forcing politicians and forcing people in power to define problems. Like for so long, we've been kind of walking through life and being fed this bullshit on this is what's causing the problem and this is what we're doing to solve it. And it's like, no, wait, like that does not connect at all. Like let's take a step back here. Let's redefine the problem or just define it correctly in the first place. And a lot of people aren't even able to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of government institutions operate kind of like insurance companies as well, where they're like, how do we avoid paying out these claims or whatever? Like how we have an operating budget, we need to maintain it, and it kind of pits them against the people in some ways, which is like the opposite of the intended purpose of them.
Yeah. And legal industries, especially, it's like when you're trying to pass red tape, I feel like a lot of time in the past, the people in power in those positions have been able to rely on the complexity of the language freaking people out, and they're not able to kind of go past the insider baseball language of a certain industry. And it seems like people aren't willing to put up with this, I don't understand this contract or what this law is really saying, so I'm just gonna like trust it in the hands of the government, like they'll take care of it. Now people are more like, no, like tell me exactly what the fuck this says, like define this for me, like you're not talking to someone else that also, works in the defense industry. Like just tell me straight up what is happening here. People aren't willing to accept just kind of the what do you call it, the verbose definition that doesn't actually make sense.
Right. And a lot of that complexity is intentional complexity, like to make things more difficult. So someone like a VA Secretary McDonough can hide behind like, well, I can't do it until I get it from this department who's waiting on this thing from this department. So, and it's like a big circle that's essentially designed to bog the whole thing down so nothing can get done.
Yeah. And when you have an episode that's 45 minutes, you can't go in circles and run out the clock like you can on CNN or Fox News or whatever, where you're just like, I'm just going to say the same shit the host is going to say, and that's our time. Like we have to go to the next person, or there's 5 other people on a panel. There's just the awkwardness of sitting in front of someone and explaining to them the thing that you can't explain to yourself.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And Jon is really good about pressing, because the thing is the advantage on our side, on his side, is that we're not access journalists. CNN, they have to keep getting the interviews. So if their people get branded as like they're dicks who are going to keep pushing, they're not going to get the access they need.